In this tutorial, we're going to talk about how to identify and fix the passive voice in your writing. The passive voice, it comes from using the verb to be. Any form of the verb to be, which includes am, is, are, was, were, been, and being. As you can see from the picture illustration there, not a terribly active verb to use. What does it mean to be? Think about it, it's a pretty boring verb. It literally means to exist. So, in light of it being such a passive verb, such a weak verb, we can probably come up with thousands of more specific and active words that can replace this word, the forms of to be in our writing. Let's take a look at the sample. I was in school. That's a really cruddy sentence. Yuck. You are not expressing in that sentence any kind of an action, simply existing in school. And you can probably do better than that. So let's take a look at some of the ways we can incorporate the idea of doing something as a replacement for the verb was. I sat or learned, talked with friends, studied math, opened my locker, attended, watched the clock, checked my phone, read a book, worked on a math problem, sculpted, practiced with marching band, listened to my teacher, finished the worksheet. You could do all of those things in school. So by simply replacing that weak descriptive word was with a more active verb, you can express and share with your reader specifically what it was you were doing in school. You can identify the passive voice in writing. I saw this on a Grammarly site a few years ago. Identify the passive voice by inserting by zombies after the verb. If that sentence makes sense, you have passive voice. So if you think about that previous sentence, I was in school by zombies, it kind of weirdly makes sense. So that's one way to kind of check your writing for the passive voice. So once we identify the verb to be by seeing it in our writing, we have to start addressing the problem. We need to fix it. So let's take a look at some of the ways we can do that. The first way and the easiest way to fix the passive voice is to simply quit using it as a helping verb and just use plain old past tense or present tense when you write. So in the example, we've got my friend was waiting for the phone call. By simply eliminating the was and changing waiting to waited, you've got this perfect past tense. So finding that ing is a pretty good indicator that you've got some helping verbs in play. And by fixing that and just moving your writing into past or present tense, you're going to fix a lot of those to be problems. Another way to address passive voice in your writing is to do what we did in the earlier example, which is to simply substitute a better verb to show the action. So I was at the football game. Well, again, what did you do at the football game? Once we establish some of our options, you can now use a more active voice and a more active verb to express the idea of what you were doing at that football game. A trickier way to address the problem of passive voice in writing is to relocate the subject, but this is sometimes a problem in people's writing. They have buried their subject, and so there is no way for the subject to take action because the subject is actually receiving the action. Let's take a look at the sample here. There are 27 students in Ms. W's fourth block class. What is our subject? We've got two options here. If you, the students, are the subject, then you can take the action. 27 students attend Miss W's fourth block class. Okay, by simply moving the students to the front of the sentence, now they can take action. They can actually do something in the fourth block class. If you make me the subject of this sentence, then I can take the action. So Ms. W has 27 students in her fourth block class. Ms. W teaches 27 students in her fourth block class. We've got lots of options once you move me or the students to the front of that sentence. So clearly identifying your subject can help you execute action in your writing. Couple of other ways to find passive voice include looking for that word there, because the word there is probably followed by are or is, and that's an indicator that you've buried your subject. And by pulling the subject forward, you can give them the action in the sentence. Another way to look for passive voice is to find those long sentences that have a lot of unnecessary phrasing. In the example I've written, she is going to be attending UW Whitewater this fall. Yikes. You can literally take 5 words and shrink it down to 2 by putting that sentence in perfect past tense. She will attend UW Whitewater this fall. So when you find yourself looking at a really long sentence, you can probably start editing down that sentence and clarifying meaning by taking a look at the use of passive voice. And you're probably going to find that you can put things in a nice, crisp way using perfect past or present tense. Now, occasionally, you just have to use the verb to be. There's just no getting around it. And a couple of instances I can think of are references to time or to age and identity. It is just too convoluted and complicated to try to express some ideas any other way. So I appreciate the fact that sometimes you will need to use the verb to be in your writing, and that's okay. My rule of thumb is try not to see more than 2 to be verbs in a single paragraph. And if that's the case, your writing's probably going to be just fine and you won't have too big of an issue. Now, here's to you, my students, who are going to go forward now and use the strong verbs in your writing. You will probably best establish strong active voice in your writing by paying careful attention to how you craft the first 2 paragraphs of anything you write. That is where you will get into trouble with passive voice, and if you make sure that you're stopping that issue right away at the beginning of your writing, you will find yourself adopting some really good habits as a writer.